and their components. We're looking today at emotional intelligence and their components. Self-awareness. We begin with self-awareness. Why is it important to have self-awareness? Because we all have emotions, and it is important to understand how our emotions affect our behavior. So the number one question for me, for you, would be how often do you reflect on how your emotions influence your behavior? And I mean your emotions influencing your behavior and not other people's emotions influencing your behavior. There is a difference between that. All right? So something to think about and ponder. How often do you reflect on how your emotions influence your behavior? All right, then we go to accurate self-assessment. So what is an accurate self-assessment in between self-awareness? That means that can you clearly identify your emotional triggers? So what triggers you? Whenever your emotions start going all over, intensify, something that is a trigger. So can you clearly identify what the trigger is? And you'll be surprised to find out that it's not always people that trigger your emotion, although you think it's people that trigger your emotion. But sometimes there might be food allergy you're going through, or noises going around, or the weather, or who knows what can trigger your emotion. So it's important to pay attention to what triggers your emotion. And then we'll look at recognizing emotional patterns. So in recognizing emotional patterns, I'm going to ask you, are you able to recognize patterns in how you respond to certain situation? Just recognize patterns. So are you able to recognize these patterns? So kind of just, look into that and see if you are able to recognize patterns. Some patterns you might be able to recognize, some patterns not so easily. So it's just starting to look into that and pay attention that there are patterns. There are emotions that affect your behavior, there are emotional triggers, and then there are patterns. And then, do you understand how your personal values and how they shape your decision? This is a big thing. Extremely important to be aware of your values and how your values shape your decision and how your values shape your emotions and your triggers and your patterns and your behavior and all that. Values, they sit at the very basic layer of you, of every human. Values, they sit at the very basic layer. So knowing your values is very important. But what we do, we think we know what our values are because we know what we like and what we don't like, but so often we have conflicting values, and it's causing more emotional upheaval and emotional lack of well-being when our values conflict. And everybody has conflicting values, but some people have more conflicting values than knowing what they like and what they don't like. So just keep in mind that your values can be conflicting. Just keep in mind, all right? And then we're looking at recognizing bodily clues and stress signals, right? Your body keeps score. Whatever happens throughout the day, whatever happens in the past. And I'm not going to get into the stress disorders, but your body keeps the score, and your body will tell you when you are more stressed than when you know that you are as stressed as your body will tell you how stressed you are, right? So how well do you notice physical signs of stress in your body? It's very important to pay attention to all of these things. So you see, self-awareness, it's a big label, it's a big term. Everybody throws self-awareness left and right, up and down. But so much is encompassed in between this self-awareness. It has so many different components that is important to keep on elevating the self-awareness, because you will never stop elevating self-awareness. Never. So and once you get a good hold of this, then you will begin to maybe gain some confidence in your emotional language. Because the number one thing in emotional intelligence communication with other people, the way you communicate, according to emotional intelligence, it is best, it is advised, and it is recommended, and it is emotionally intelligent to use fewer words with you when addressing to someone, and make most statements in I statement, referring to you, I statement, to your experiences, to how you understand and how you perceive it. How did I understand this right? Did I hear this right? This is what I'm understanding. This is what I'm hearing. Instead of you didn't say this, or I didn't hear you. In this emotional intelligence language, using the word you the least amount of time, it will elevate your the confidence in your emotional language. So again, self-awareness, the key components, and this is not the complete list, but the key components in self-awareness is emotional self-awareness, accurate self-assessment, recognizing emotional patterns, awareness of personal values and goals, knowing emotional triggers, recognizing bodily cues and stress signals, and confidence in emotional language. So that is the self-awareness part. So now we're moving to self-regulation. Self-regulation, when we lack self-regulation, it's when we experience the most amount of lack of balance. So self-regulation is highly important, as important as self-awareness. If you don't have self-awareness, then it's a bit difficult for you to self-regulate. And self-regulation means behavior. Well, all of the emotional intelligence middle name is behavior, right? But the key components of self-regulation would be emotional self-control, stress management, impulse control, adaptability, goal-directed behavior, motivation and perseverance, delayed gratification, mindful response versus reactive behavior, conflict de-escalation, and thought, emotion, action alignment. Thought, emotion, action alignment. So you align your actions to the convergence of your thought and emotion. All right. So it's not as difficult as of a topic as you think it is, because you do go through a lot of convergence of thought and emotions. You just skip right through the awareness part of it and skip through the self-regulating part of it. So as you grow self-awareness and then get better at self-regulating, the convergence of your thought, emotion, action, alignment will increase. And then guess what? Happiness goes up, success goes up, you're motivated, you achieve goals and all that. So some of the good question in this chapter on self-regulation would be, how easily can you calm yourself in emotionally intense situation? Yeah. How easily can you calm yourself in emotionally intense situation? Yeah. Sometimes easier and sometimes not so easier, but you want to become aware of that, and also as you increase your self-awareness, you will find ways to calm your emotions in intense situation. And then the other question is, when you're stressed out, do you use healthy strategies to manage your stress? Yeah. So a lot of people use so many unhealthy strategies to manage their stress. It's not good. So just being aware of the fact that maybe you manage your stress with unhealthy strategies is something to keep in mind, and to ponder on it, to learn how to manage your stress with healthy strategies. All right? And the other question is, when you're stressed out, do you use healthy strategies to manage it? Well, I just covered that. So the other question is, how well do you control your impulses when feeling emotional? Yeah. Everybody has impulses when feeling emotional, and the way everybody makes decision is based on feelings, it's based on emotions, and just knowing that and being aware of that, sometimes there's too much of an emotional upheaval that it's not ideal for you to make a decision in that particular moment, right? When the emotional upheaval is high. So how well do you control your impulses, right? And everybody has a good amount of control over their impulses, and it is important to be able to control your impulses when you're feeling emotional. This elevates not only your emotional intelligence, but elevates your happiness, because you elevating your emotional intelligence is just going to elevate your happiness and your success in life, and your life will be more fulfilled. All right? And the other question is, do you adapt quickly when you're faced with unexpected changes? So there are always unexpected changes, and do you adapt quickly when you're faced with it? Well, sometimes it's easier to do so and sometimes not. But when the unexpected changes are catastrophic, then of course it might be difficult to quickly adapt to it. But unexpected changes like the schedule has changed, or the weather changed, or somebody didn't show up for their appointment, that's something that you should be able to adapt quickly to this kind of change. All right. And then the other question is, it's how consistently do you follow through on goals despite emotional ups and downs? So we all have emotional ups and downs. But what about the goals? When we have an emotional down, does that mean we're not going to follow through with our goals? Because then the goals don't get accomplished, and then there's going to be an additional emotional down. So this is part of the self-regulation, and is important to be aware of, as discussed earlier, and then to implement self-regulation and pay attention, become aware of how consistently do you follow through on your goals, because goals need to be achieved. Every goals are a map to success. They are a formula to success. If you break a chain, you're not gonna arrive to the expected result, right? So letting emotions fluctuating, like when you're feeling down, you're not going to work towards your goal, is detrimental to you. It's detrimental to you, and there's something to think about, right? And something to get better at it, because self-regulation is important. And the key components of self-regulation, otherwise known as self-management, are emotional self-control, stress management, impulse control, adaptability, goal-directed behavior, motivation and perseverance, delayed gratification, mindful response versus reactive behavior, conflict de-escalation, and thought, emotion, action, alignment, right? So when you have an emotional upheaval, what thoughts are accompanying those emotional upheaval? So something to be cognizant of, increase your self-awareness, and then begin self-regulating the thoughts that accompany that emotion, because a lot of it is automatic, but not everything, not all of it needs to be automatic. All right. And then we move to social awareness. Social awareness is the ability to understand the emotions, needs, and concerns of other people. As you have emotions and as you have needs, so do other people. Everybody has emotion and everybody has needs. Yeah. So the key components of social awareness are empathy, which is the cognitive, emotional, and compassionate. Then perspective taking, have a different point of view. Reading social cues and dynamics is important as you develop your social awareness. And then the awareness of group emotions. Every group will have an emotion or sum of emotion, several emotions, right? Every group, or they fluctuate from an emotion to other, but overall the whole group will have an energy to it, which is a dominant emotion to it. Then there's cultural and social sensitivity. With so many cultures around, especially in the United States, it's a melting pot of culture, especially in larger cities. So being sensitive to someone's cultural identity, or their cultural norms, is important. And that's actually very easy to do. And then respect for other people's emotional boundaries. It's very, very important, because as you have emotional boundaries, and you do, whether you can state them in words or not, you do have emotional boundaries. Everybody has emotional boundaries. And you get to know, or somebody else gets to know your emotional boundaries when you just explode at somebody, at something, or at somebody. Yeah, that's how you know whether you can label them or not. So other people have emotional boundaries too. So when people cut you off, that's a sign of their boundary. When the people pull back, that's a sign of their emotional boundary. Yeah, and you do not want to discount that, and you do not want to talk down on it ever, because you don't want to be in that situation, right? When somebody talks down on your emotional boundaries. And it's important to know that these emotional boundaries, they fluctuate. Sometimes these boundaries are, some boundaries, they fluctuate according to what's going on in your current environment, right? Sometimes some things may bother you easier than other things, depending on how much stress you have on your plate. And then also social awareness, the ability to understand emotions and needs and concerns of other people, includes recognizing unspoken emotions. And there's a lot of it, unspoken emotion. So some of the good questions on social awareness would be, how easily do you empathize with other people's emotional experiences? Right? Everybody has emotional experiences, but how easily do you empathize? Putting yourself in their shoes, having a perspective taking, that key component of social awareness, perspective taking. So how easily do you empathize with others' emotional experiences? Something very important to build, to begin to develop your empathy. Empathy is such a the terminology empathy. Usually you hear this word a lot lately, but hearing the word and being empathetic are two different things. So it's something that it's so necessary nowadays, all of this empathy. And the word empathy, I could talk about it for 20 hours straight. It's misunderstood often, as some people understand empathy and communicate empathy as them feeling other people's emotions. That's not empathy, that's sympathy. So empathy, it means to take a different perspective, take the perspective of the other person's that's having emotion, or it's having an experience, yeah, and see your environment from their point of view, right? See your environment from their point of view, because you have values and then they have values, and not to mention about you having conflicting values. But you want to begin working on becoming more empathetic, yeah? Being empathetic doesn't mean you have to carry somebody else's emotion through you, right? Doesn't mean you have to walk in their shoes. You can imagine what walking in their shoes would be like, okay? It's very, very important. And then the other question would be, can you accurately read other people's nonverbal cues? Yeah. Communication, as we know it, it's not verbal only. Verbal communication is just a little bit of it, nonverbal communication, it's happens much more than the verbal communication. So can you accurately read other people's nonverbal cues, right? And it's important because you have nonverbal cues and other people have nonverbal cues, right? So you want to be as nice as possible, trying to think of a different word better than nice, as polite. You want to be as polite as possible when stating your boundaries or stating your perspective. But then other people might not read your nonverbal cues, right? But then will motivate you. It's a bit paradoxical, but that will motivate you to elevate your empathy a little more, right? There's no straight lines. Emotional intelligence is no straight lines. And then the other question is, do you adjust your behavior based on group emotional dynamic? Do you adjust your behavior based on group emotional dynamic? Well, if the group emotional dynamic is a happy, cheerful one, I hope you do. But if a group emotional dynamic is a negative one, I hope you don't. Yeah. Or if the group emotional dynamic is a negative one, I hope you adjust your behavior appropriately so you don't engage in those negative emotions. Yeah. So when in a situation, in a group dynamic with a heightened negativity, you can respectfully decline and step away, right? When in a group with a positive and cheerful emotional dynamic, you can joyfully join in and don't take the energy down, right? Keep it up with the joy and joyfulness and cheerfulness that is provided. And the other question is, are you respectful of other people's emotional limits and boundaries? Yeah. So you've already done self-awareness and you've already done self-regulation. Now we're taking this many notches up. Are you respectful of other people's emotional limits and boundaries? Probably not. You probably get upset. Why they do that? Oh, they're too emotional. Oh, that, this, that, a lot of labeling, right? But you have emotional limits and you have emotional boundaries, then let's have you be more respectful on other people's emotional limits and boundaries. It's actually rather easy to do. And one more question on social awareness is, how often do you notice unspoken concerns in your conversation? How often do you notice unspoken concerns in your conversation? We just talked earlier that communication, it's not always verbal. Doesn't include words necessarily. It's a lot of body language. It's non-verbal cues. So how often do you notice unspoken concerns in conversation? Yeah. So you want to be able to do that. And the next slide is relationship management. Oh, that's a good one, relationship management. Relationships are the hardest thing to do in life. Just the hardest thing to do in life. And everybody skips the self-awareness, the self-regulation, and the social awareness. They just go into relationship management, and they want relationship management to be handy-dandy. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. For a good relationship, self-awareness and self-regulation and social awareness is needed, because in the social awareness, as we just talked about it earlier, you develop the skills necessary to manage a relationship, interpersonal skills, people skills, right? They used to be called people skills. And this is the ability to build and maintain healthy relationships through emotional and social skills, right? So the key components of that include clear, compassionate communication, active listening, constructive feedback, influence and persuasion. Oh, I know, everybody wants to get to influence and persuasion, but they skip self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, and all of the active listening and constructing feedback and compassionate communication. They skip all of that, just want to go into influence and persuasion. It doesn't work like that, right? Then conflict resolution, collaboration and cooperation, building trust and rapport, leadership through empathy. We just talked about empathy a little earlier. Managing difficult conversations, and setting relational boundaries. Yeah. So I've been talking about boundaries a lot in the past few weeks. Boundaries are very important, but before you set boundaries, you need to increase your self-awareness. You need to increase your self-regulation. You need to understand your values. You need to begin to get to know your emotions, a different type of emotion that you experience, because we are mostly aware of the negative emotions that we experience, and we overlook the positive emotion. It is just 99% of people do that. Positive emotions are so overlooked because they feel light and airy, and then negative emotion, they feel dense and heavy, and then the attention, the focus is placed more on this negative emotions as opposed to positive emotions. So we want to be cognizant of it and begin to build on the cognition of that, right? So questions. The relationship management, interpersonal skills. Question number 1 is, how well do you express emotions in a respectful, clear manner? How well do you express emotions in a respectful, clear manner? I just talked earlier about it. And the way you communicate your emotions, you make I statements. I feel, I understand, I experience, I, and not you. When you communicate and express emotions, you want to use the word you as slowly as possible, because the situation is heightened, it's emotionally aroused, and the more you're going to use the word you, it's going to create an accusatory type of environment that is not going to help at all with you expressing emotion. Actually, it's going to deter you from properly expressing emotions. All right? And then the next question is, can you actively listen without interrupting or offering premature advice? I'll say that again. Can you actively listen without interrupting or offering premature advice? We do that a lot, don't we? Yeah. Sometimes people just need to say a few words. They don't need to be interrupted. They don't need any advice. If they need any advice, they would say so. They would eventually get to it. But sometimes people need to kind of go through it, talk it through. Right? It's good to talk things through. Well, not everything, but can you actively listen without interrupting and offering premature advice? Everybody has their own being, has their life, has their values, has their emotion, their boundaries, and emotional intelligence. So when you interrupt people, I know a few some ethnic communities are a bit more hot-blooded, and they're not patient until the sentences are finished, and they're so quick to interrupt. It's just lack of patience, right? So something to be very cognizant of. Active listening is so important. If all you do is active listening, all of the other steps required, all of the other key components required in emotional intelligence, your emotional intelligence would just skyrocket. Skyrocket. All of them. Active listening. That's it. Well, of course you get to say some things too, because you have things to say. But the more you listen, the more you learn. And the more you listen to others, you listen to yourself as well. Right? Because you have 2 years. You have 2 years, right? You see twice, you hear twice, you speak once. The other question is, how do you handle disagreements? How do you handle disagreements? Do you aim to resolve the disagreements, or do you go in defense mode? Just defense mode. Or do you aim to resolve disagreements? Disagreements will never end. There's always going to be some disagreements. There's always going to be a different point of view, and it should. If all of us on planet Earth would have the same values, the same beliefs, the same point of view, life would be boring, right? So, there's always going to be disagreements. On the same topic, you might disagree with someone, or someone might disagree with you on a particular given day, and then on a different day, they might agree with. It's not that relevant. What's relevant is that when there is a disagreement, how are you handling it? Are you aiming to resolve it, or are you aiming to defend it? Right? So let's resolve it. Let's resolve it and not defend it. And then the other question is, on interpersonal scale, is, are you able to build trust with people over time? Are you able to trust people, and are people trusting you? It's a two-way street. Being too trustworthy, maybe it's not being trustworthy, but lacking prudence. Maybe it's not a good idea, right? Being too open and assuming that everybody else is at the same level, so overly trusting, right? But also, can people trust you? So trust is a big deal, building trust and rapport. Relationships, interpersonal skill, people skill, trust and rapport, very, very important. And in sales and marketing, it has been studies and a lot of research has been done that products or services are purchased not because they are of higher quality, but because of trust and rapport, right? So if we do this with non-humans, if we do this with products and services, imagine how beautifully we can do that with humans, right? Build trust and rapport with people, but with yourself as well. Trust your emotional intelligence and trust your motivation, which is the next step to keep on working and elevating that emotional intelligence, right? And one more question on relationship management is, do you feel confident in managing emotionally difficult conversations? That's not an easy one. Do you feel confident in managing emotionally difficult conversations? Right? Because your body might be flooded with all kinds of emotions, all over, emotions all over. But then your thoughts are going to go so many directions, but then what words are you going to utilize to handle that emotional difficult conversation? Yeah. You see twice, you hear twice, you speak once. Yeah. So the next order of things is motivation. Motivation, intrinsic motivation, the emotional tendency to pursue your goals with energy and persistence. Persistent and consistent, right? And the key components on motivation are optimism and hope, initiative and drive, commitment to personal goals, resilience in setbacks, internal reward orientation, purposeful focus, passion and persistence, joy in learning and improving. Wonderful, wonderful topic. Why is it important to get on top of your motivation? Because the intrinsic motivation is what you want to be on top of. Because the extrinsic motivation, you are already handling that pretty well. Not that you like it very much, but you're handling it, right? So the questions, some of the questions on that are, how optimistic are you about reaching your long-term goals? How optimistic? Yeah. The other question is, how often do you take initiative on tasks without external pressure? Yeah. Well, that's the extrinsic motivation. So the intrinsic motivation says, take initiative on tasks without the external pressure. Well, it helps to have a deadline, but you can set a deadline for yourself that's ahead of the big deadline that somebody's waiting on you, and then you will be so self-rewarded when you meet that deadline because you took the initiative to focus on this task and complete this task based on your earlier deadline. So kudos to you, right? The other question is, when you fail at something, do you bounce back with clarity and purpose? Mm-hmm. You fail at something. We all fail at something. Sometimes we fail. We just fell and, get back up on a horse, get up and go back on a horse. So when you fail at something, do you bounce back with clarity and purpose? Well, okay to be disappointed at first, okay to not like the fact that you fail, but to sit and feel sorry for yourself about you failing at something, it doesn't help. It doesn't help any of the emotional intelligence key components. Doesn't help your happiness. Doesn't help your emotional repertoire. It doesn't help it. So bounce back, flexibility, right? And one more question is, how deeply do you feel committed to your personal growth? Yeah. Personal growth, it never stops. We always grow, we always learn, we always improve, whether we like it or not, whether we do it consciously or not. That happens. It happens, right? So how deeply do you feel committed to your personal growth? Some people are deeply committed, and those people that are deeply committed to their personal growth, they have the highest success in their fulfillment in life. They have the happiest life, not material life, I'm not talking about material life, but the happiest people we know are the people that are committed to their personal growth, that have worked on their personal growth and continue to improve and continue to go forward with their personal growth. Happiness is within, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So, yeah. One more question. Okay, this is the last question. Is, do you enjoy learning and improving even when no one else sees it? Do you enjoy learning and improving even when no one else sees it? See, this is the intrinsic motivation, because we learn and improve when we go to school, but there is such an extrinsic motivation to have a good grade, to be on the teacher's good graces, and all that. But when nobody's gonna grade you at anything, do you enjoy learning and improving? Because it is you, the grade, you grade yourself, and the joy you get from learning and improving, nothing can top that. No, not even that. No, not even that. No, not even that. Nothing can top the joy you get from learning and improving. So that's that. We have self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness, relationship management, and intrinsic motivation. All right?